Michelle, it's really, I'm very excited about this interview. Thanks for accepting it. First of all, I want to say that you've got so many fans among children, and not just children, also parents, I suppose, around the world, and amazing books. So I want to start by asking you, how did your story as a writer begin? And when did you discover this passion? And also the other important passion of yours, illustration. So you just have to tell us, because you also illustrated some of your books.
Yeah. I think that it began very young, probably. I used to make up little plays and make my three brothers perform them begrudgingly. And I was always writing little stories. And then I went to school for literature and then a master's in fiction writing. And I was writing these adult short stories, and I wasn't having much fun. Like, it just wasn't super fun. And my mom, who had always read to us when we were kids, read to us before bed. It was sort of like a reward and a fun thing at the end of the day. She, when I was in school, sent me some of the books she had found around the house from when I was younger, and I started rereading them. Some, Roald Dahl, things like that. And I was like, oh, these are so good. I'd forgotten how good they were. And so I just, it kind of clicked like a light bulb, and I thought I should try writing one of these. And so I did, and I had fun the whole time. It was, and I think it was one of those things where, as a writer, sometimes you luck out and find the kind of writing that just feels like home. Like, it just feels like this is what I'm supposed to be writing. It comes naturally, and it doesn't feel hard, which, so I think I got lucky, and I kind of found that, and I have not really looked back since. I really enjoy writing books for kids.
So I guess it's like you can let your imagination fly, and there are no limits when you're writing for children. Is this the best part?
Yeah, I think that's what it is. I think that writing for children, you realize that adults can get a little stuck in their ways, or they've made up their minds about a lot of things. Whereas children are so open, and they're willing to go wherever you want to take them in a story, and you can do fantastical things, and they'll go, yeah, okay, yeah, that could happen, and that's great. And it makes it so much more fun to write for them, and more fun to talk about the books too. Yeah.
Well, you write for children. What is the fundamental message, or messages, whatever, that you're trying to send to them through your books?
I have this thing I've noticed, that I have a tendency. I write a lot of stories about lonely characters who are searching for connection or community, and so this book, for example, this is Confessions of an Imaginary Friend, and this one was about a boy who turned out to be his sister's imaginary friend, and he doesn't know it, and he just thinks everyone hates him. So he's like this lonely, kind of feeling left out, and he kind of figures out that the way to combat feeling so lonely is through kindness to other people. So he kind of finds connection in that way. Similarly, this out here in Romania, The Uncorker of Ocean Bottles in English, it's about a lonely person whose job it is to find bottles out in the ocean with notes in them and deliver them. And he's very lonely. He's also very lonely. He wishes he would find a note to himself. So when he's trying to deliver these, he ends up making lots of friends. And again, it was through his kindness. Like, I think that's a theme in a lot of my books, is that if you're looking for connection, one way to do it is through being giving to other people.
What do you think that drives you to write about lonely and introverted characters somehow? Why?
I think probably just that I was when I was younger. I'm a little more outgoing now, but when I was younger, I was a bit shy, and I really just was often, if you would find me just making up games and imaginary friends and things like that, and making up songs. And I think it wasn't a loneliness in a sad way necessarily. It was just a memory of that feeling of kind of being on your own a bit, or a bit of a lone wolf, and sort of using your imagination as a companion. And so I think that inspires me sometimes.
Yeah, that was one of my questions. I wanted to ask you if you ever had an imaginary friend in your childhood, and also what inspires you the most in general?
I did. I had 2 imaginary friends, and I feel like when I first started doing interviews and school visits for the book, it was one of the most asked questions by kids. And I had 2, they were named Pootie and Lala, which I've never seen kids laugh harder than when you tell them that. They think it's just the best. One was a dragon and one was like a doll. My family still remembers it. They kind of, when I was working on the book, they were like, oh yeah, you had those imaginary friends. I think inspiration wise, I think that, I said before I write because it's fun for me, but I also think that when you're young, you're kind of, you're sort of becoming the person you're going to be. I mean, the things that you read, I think they become part of you. Like they're books I read when I was younger, kind of build the person you end up being. They teach you empathy and how to treat others. And so, on the one hand, I'm having fun, but I also think there's some responsibility to sort of present lessons in a way that they're fun and they want to read, but also have a little bit more to it.
I also want to ask you, what was your first book ever like, and when did you write it?
I know exactly what it was because my mom saved it. I was like 8 years old, I think, and it was called The Life of a Talking Shoe. And I don't know in Romania if they say this, but in the US, when you have a sneaker, it's got like a tongue that's like the front part of, yeah. So I was like, oh, as a tongue, it can talk. So 8 years old, I was like, talking shoe. So that was my first, yeah. Yeah, that shoe could talk.
So great. Okay, now I also want to ask you, you also illustrate your books. So you must tell me about this other hobby of yours. What was the first? The writing or the painting and drawing?
Definitely the writing. I did not take art classes. It was one of those things that I always did. I always was doodling characters, and I do have notebooks where I would draw all the characters in different books I was working on, but it was just for me. It was just kind of for fun. And then in this book, and then in the Imaginary Friend book, it's an autobiography by an imaginary friend. So he's 8, and he draws a picture at one point of his own imaginary friend. It's very complicated. So I drew it just to show the publishing house what I thought it should look like. And they said, why don't you do the pictures? This is, this looks great. So it was actually kind of, I was nervous because I had never had that, responsibility, or I felt like I would do lots of drafts of them because there was a certain look I wanted, a certain like lively movement, and almost to look like they were coming out of the imagination of an 8-year-old. So it's actually hard sometimes to make a drawing look less perfect. Like you even once in a while would draw with my opposite hand to get that kind of wild look. Yeah.
I know that Fox Animation acquired the rights to make 2 of your books, to make them movies. Among them also Confessions of an Imaginary Friend. I wanna ask you, how did you feel? Or did you see that coming? What was it like the first time you found out?
Yeah. Yes, they are Fox Animation, and their animation studio is called Blue Sky Studios. They optioned Confessions for an animated film, and they're the studio that did like Ice Age, and they just did Ferdinand, and they're really great. And and they also optioned my novel that just came out at the end of last year, and I feel like I think that everyone thought I would be nervous as a writer. They kind of said like, oh, are you nervous that they'll change it so much or anything? And I've met the people working on them, and I think they're going to do a really great job. Like, they seem to really understand what I was trying to do with the books and the voice of the characters, and so that actually I'm not worried. It was super exciting. I feel like on the one hand, when you do a picture book, especially, you're working with these amazing artists, and something comes out of your mind and you hand it to them, and then they give you back this like work of art. Like, it's this gorgeous, they've been doing these paintings or drawings, and it's this amazing thrill because someone made something so beautiful out of something you just made up. And so the idea of an animated film is similar. You kind of think, oh, it'll be so fun to like see these characters and all the artwork they're going to do, and you know, the set pieces, and to think that it was something that you were like, oh, that was just an idea or something that was in my mind.
Well, good luck with that. We really hope to see all of your books into movies. As a writer for children, I would also like to ask you something that I don't know, maybe everywhere, but here in Romania it's quite of a problem. Children, most of the children today, they don't really are into reading so much. So what would be your advice for parents, not for children, for parents? How could parents help their children want to read, like to read? Yeah. What would you say to them?
Yeah, I think that's a kind of a problem everywhere. I think two things. I think one, really go to the bookshop, or especially, smaller bookshops, go to the library, even talk to teachers and just say, these are some things my child's interested in. My child likes outer space and horses and, cooking or anything. And they will find you books or novels that have some aspect of that. And that can really help. And then I think the second thing is make it like a treat. Like I think when I was younger, my mom, we would get to read one chapter of even when I was too small to read it myself, we would get to read one chapter of a chapter book before bed. And I would, because stories tend to have a plot, and you'd be wondering what would happen next. So at bedtime, you'd be like, oh yeah, I wonder what's going to happen with this character. So it became, and then as you get older, reading isn't like schoolwork. It's something that you get to do for fun. So that could help.
We are happy, so it's sort of a must-ask question, and I'm really interested in what you're going to say. What does happiness mean to you? What makes you happy?
I think that it was interesting. We were talking about, connection and finding connection and kindness with people. So I think my family makes me very happy, and my friends. And I think that I'm not the type of person who is going to large parties and has a million friends. I really have a few like very, very close friends, and very close to my family. So I think that makes me really happy. And I also think that when you find something to do with your time, as far as a job, that is something that you love doing, it really makes you very happy. And I once heard it described, and I think this is true for me, as it feels like home when you're doing it, because whether you're very, very successful or you're doing, something is a flop and no one likes it, the next morning you wake up and you go to your desk and you sit down and you write, and you're feeling even, and you're feeling at home, and you're feeling happy, because that's the actual part of it. All the other stuff is, it can be great or it can be sad, but that is really the thing that hopefully makes you happy. Yeah.
What's your biggest dream right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say my biggest dream is I guess right now it's a dream for the perfect idea, but I have been wanting to write a series. I think and I do have some ideas, and they're all kind of dancing around and not quite perfect, but I think it'd be so exciting to kind of like a Harry Potter, where you get to go into a world for a really long period of time and get to really know characters. And I think that would be a huge challenge, but I kind of have this like dream that I have like the energy and like the right idea and to take on something like that large.
How did you feel? First of all, I want to ask if this is your first time here in Romania, in Bucharest, and then I want to ask you how did you feel? How was your class with the children?
So it was my first time in Romania, and it was actually really exciting. So they sent me a message when I was back in the United States, and they said, oh, would you be interested in doing an illustration workshop? And of course I was very nervous, because I'm just not an illustrator. I didn't go to school for it, and it's something I have done now for 2 books, but I had never thought about teaching people to draw. then I actually stopped and thought about it, and I thought, actually, you draw very much like a child, like very simple. I love simple, silly drawings. And so I started looking through my sketches, and I was like, I think that these are just shapes, and I think there's definitely a way I can have fun teaching some young folks how to draw these, and maybe they would. So I tried it, and then I started thinking about, well, what aspects of my drawings make them unique, and I realized that they all were kind of had exaggerated features and funny eyes, and so I think that I actually got kind of excited. It was like, oh, this is something new, and I've never done it, and it'll probably be kind of silly, but in a fun way, an interesting way. And it actually was it was great. The kids seem to be having a good time with it, and it's always such a fun time to see, when you're a kid and you do a drawing and you're like, oh, I did it. That feeling, you're like, I did the drawing. So that was actually really cute to see, and I enjoyed that.
Actually, I think it was great, and I think you really changed some lives today, because I'm sure there were some children that maybe didn't dare to draw because they were told, or they thought, I'm not a great drawer. And today you just show them that whatever you want to do, you can do if you just allow yourself to do it. So it was great. What have you got in store for your readers?
I can actually show you right here. This is my newest book, and it comes out next week in the U.S. And usually there is a lag time in other countries, maybe a year or two. This book is about a turtle, and he decides to do some renovations on his shell. So he's like painting, and then he's like, maybe I will build an extension, maybe I'll make a deck, maybe I'll do another floor, maybe I could have a pond, maybe I could have, so he ends up building an entire town on his shell. And then he falls asleep, and friends move in, and so he's very excited because he's got all these new friends. And it was really fun to write, but it's even more intriguing that the pictures, the artwork, they're very impressionistic and bright colors, and it's an American illustrator, Katya Chen, and so yeah, we're excited. It comes out next week, and we get to share it with people. Yeah.